Have you ever wanted to serve internationally but don't have a lot of time or money? Worried that you cannot be of assistance because you don't know the local language? Well, International Service Learning has a solution. Consider one of their many short-term service learning trips abroad where they will take care of everything from country arrival to departure. Choose from a wide variety of programs and an ever-growing list of countries with International Service Learning, where their motto is travel, serve, learn. The website's easy, internationalservicelearning.org. Thanks for joining us on another episode of the International Service Learning Experiential Education Podcast, where our goal has always been to share the voices of international service. I'm Dr. Patrick Hickey, or Dr. H, and it has been my honor to be the host of this podcast. It's another great day to talk about service, and joining us today to do so is Rachel. Well, I'm real excited to have Rachel with us today, and just to let everyone know, I have known Rachel for 2 to 3 years, maybe.
Yeah, about 3.
Something like that from the University of South Carolina. We've known each other through that time, and my role as a mentor of sorts, and also Rachel's become kind of sort of family, I guess. She's been able to help care for my mother-in-law who has dementia, and so Rachel's been most loving and caring for my mother-in-law, and we really appreciate that. But now she's graduated and she's home and about to take on another big journey. But before we get into that, Rachel, if you don't mind, just share with us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, why you chose University of South Carolina, what your major was, and did you follow through with that major?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm really happy to be here, but I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio, which is in the southwest corner of Ohio, right near Kentucky. And I chose the University of South Carolina sort of on a whim. I went down to Charleston with my mom for a CME conference when I was a freshman in high school, and we were passing through Columbia and decided to tour the school. And it was always in the back of my mind when I was making my decision for college, but then when the time came, it just was the perfect fit for me. I liked the big school culture. I liked the sporting events, and it had a lot of programs that were going to be really great for me as a future student. So I decided to stick with it, and I started in 2022 in the fall. I was a biology major and a Spanish minor to begin, but then I decided to switch things up, and I added a women and gender studies major to that. So I graduated with my bachelor's of science in biology and my bachelor's of arts in women and gender studies. And I had the medical humanities and culture and health promotion and education and behavior minors along the way as well, which was really wonderful. So I just graduated about a week ago at the beginning of May, and I've been home ever since.
Thanks for sharing your path, and especially for what you shared with us about changing majors or adding different parts, because you are pre-med and already accepted into medical school. And I'll let you share that with the audience in just a minute. But from my experience, 15 or 20 years of doing this, I see a lot of students that are pre-med and they come in with the mindset, I have to be biology or chemistry, and solely that. But you've expanded. Why did you have the other minors? How did you choose those?
Yeah, so during my sophomore fall, I took a class called Medical Humanities. It was a course that looked at the social determinants of health behind medicine and the sociology of medicine in general. And that kind of opened my eyes up to a world that I hadn't discovered, because before that, like you had mentioned, I was really on I have to be a biology major. I have to learn the sciences to become a physician. But that class really opened my eyes to a world beyond the science behind medicine. So I started to explore more of the humanities, and I decided to add those minors because I wanted to sort of expand my worldview and look at things that impact health beyond just basic science and genetics and biology and stuff like that.
Well, that's great, and I hope we have someone in the audience that will they'll listen to that and push themselves to step outside their comfort zone and maybe take another course that will open their eyes to the social determinants of health and what else is out there that could really help them to be more well-rounded. And what about the Spanish minor? What was with that?
So I started the Spanish minor when I came to college and I took a semester of Spanish based on, the placement tests that I had taken before I began college. It was an interesting experience because I had been in Spanish classes during high school, but I had not always enjoyed them because I felt that it was a lot of memorization rather than practice. And I thought maybe it would be a little bit different when I came to college, but I kind of found the same experience. I had a lot of difficulty memorizing verb tenses, and I didn't feel like I could really use them. I just felt that I knew them on paper. So I decided to change it up and focus on kind of the more medical and biology and women and gender studies during college and use my Spanish in practical settings. So I was really glad to go on a medical mission trip where I was able to practice my Spanish. And I spent a semester abroad in Barcelona, so I was able to sort of practice my Spanish there. But I really find that I excel in Spanish when I can use it in the real world rather than just in a classroom setting.
Now, you're women and gender studies, is that correct?
Yeah.
Specialty area of focus. Expand on that a little bit to let everyone know. I believe that probably led to your honors thesis, did it not?
Yeah, absolutely. So most of my classes that I took within the women and gender studies major were focused on maternal health and health disparities and global views of the healthcare systems that exist across the world. And that major is specifically extremely malleable to your interests. So there's a lot of different classes that fall under the category of women and gender studies at the University of South Carolina. So I was able to sort of make the major fit my interests, which was wonderful. And then with that major, I discovered some of the things that were important to me. And like you said, that led to my honors thesis. So I looked at informed consent during childbirth for episiotomies, and that sort of topic was informed by some of the information that I had learned in different classes that focused on healthcare and the lack of consent and autonomy that exists within the healthcare system for some women.
And where are you going with that now? I was there at your defense. I was your, I guess, second read on your
Yep.
committee, which I very appreciate you including me in that process. Where are you going with the research you did? What's the opportunity for moving forward with it?
So right now I have basically I had submitted my final draft for the honors thesis to be approved. And now it sort of transitions from the university's requirements to what a journal requires. So I'm looking to get that published, but it'll be a lot of editing and cutting down as well as involving other people on the process. So you served as my second reader, and I had my PI in my laboratory serve as my thesis director, but involving other people is really essential for that. So I think that I'm going to sort of reach out to people as I transition into medical school to serve on a smaller committee to then help me get that published and make sure that it's finished before I publish it.
Now, I learned a lot actually reading your paper, and one was a term that was new to me, and it's probably been out there for a while. OV, obstetric violence.
hmm
Can you share a little bit about that if you don't mind?
Yeah, so obstetric balance is one of the topics that I focus on throughout the thesis. So anything that violates a woman's right during childbirth is considered obstetric violence. So that can include things like lack of informed consent for specific procedures. I specifically focus on episiotomy, but the same theme could be applied to forceful vaginal examinations or lack of privacy, lack of freedom to choose a birthing position. And then obstetric violence can also expand and cover topics like verbal and physical abuse, lack of being able to eat or drink during labor, and anything that sort of violates what the woman wants within their birthing experience constitutes obstetric violence.
It was amazing for me to read about that and to see the percentages worldwide and in the United States, which was quite eye-opening. That's great. I'm really excited for you moving forward, being such a women's health advocate. and to take what you've learned already and move forward with that and share that with your team. And who knows where you're going to be in the future. I'm sure somewhere in the OBGYN world where you'll be building on your research and
Absolutely.
all your future patients will benefit greatly from your compassion. Well, thanks for sharing all that. I know that's not why we're here today, but you know it is an expansion of who you are and what you've done. Tell us about your service learning trip. When was that, and where was it?
Absolutely. So I went to Guatemala during the spring of 2024. So it was during my sophomore year of college over spring break during our school year. And I went with members of my pre-medical fraternity, Phi Delta Epsilon. And the trip was organized by members of FIDE, but also members of ISL who were sort of the country coordinators. And so I was just sort of a participant on that trip. And I went to Guatemala. We flew into Guatemala City, and then the majority of the trip we were in Panajachel, which is right on the lake in Guatemala. And then we spent a day in Antigua as well on the back end of the trip.
I mean, I've been to Panajachel, love that area, love Antigua also. Tell me what it was like actually in the clinics. Where was your clinic set up and what was your patient population like while you were there?
Yeah, so our clinic was set up about a 30 to 40-minute drive from the place that we were staying. So we were kind of staying on the level of the lake, but then every morning that we had a clinic day, we would take a bus and drive up the mountain. So it's a very inaccessible area for someone to receive healthcare. So that's why I think it was really wonderful that we went and we were able to provide that care, because at the end of the day, it would have been honestly an hour walk down the mountain and probably 2 hours up the mountain for anybody to even receive care. And if somebody needs, emergent care, that's not accessible. And then if they're hurt, it's really not feasible to walk down and up a mountain. So it was wonderful that we were able to go up. So we would take the bus up to the top of the mountain where the town was that we were helping in. And the clinic was actually set up in one of the community members' houses. So they had sort of moved the bigger objects in their house out of the way, and we were able to establish three different clinical rooms and then a pharmacy room in their living room where we had a medication cabinet and some other supplies that had been donated to us by members of the community back in Columbia, South Carolina, that we brought with us. And then in terms of the clinical spaces that we had three different rooms with groups of students like myself and then physicians that rotated through the rooms.
That was great that you were able to improvise to set up a clinic in someone's home
Yeah.
like that. But that is the standard when you go on some of these service learning medical mission trips. That flexibility is greatly needed. And as far as the patient population, was there any common medical issues or challenges that you saw during your time there?
So a lot of the patients that we saw were women that had come from either close by in the town or they had walked a little bit because they had heard that we were coming, and they either came alone or they came with children. That was a common theme that I saw, a lot of women that had brought their children to visit the clinic. And then in terms of health conditions that we found, there were a lot of people that experienced high blood pressure and diabetes that were not controlled. And so when we were doing the physical exam, we would take vitals, and a lot of the things that we found were high blood pressure and the idea that they didn't have the medication to control that blood pressure, or they didn't even know that they had high blood pressure. And because people had high blood pressure, we saw a lot of headaches, blurry vision, feeling like just kind of feeling anxious about experiencing those physical symptoms. That was sort of a common theme that we saw, and it was unexplained before we diagnosed that hypertension. And then once we did, you could kind of feel like the ease come over that patient once they knew that their headaches had a reason and it was something that could be fixed through medication.
With the chronic problems you describe of hypertension and diabetes, were you able to adequately treat them? Or how were you able to treat them as best possible in a rural clinic?
So we didn't have the medication that was necessary to treat hypertension. A lot of the medications that we have were over the counter or donated medications, but we weren't able to provide prescription medications. So a lot of the solutions, I put in air quotes, of chronic conditions were referral by the physician to go to a physician in the town where they could actually receive medication for hypertension, but it was a lot of education about behavioral changes and like changes in eating habits and physical activity that were given to them. So it was a lot of education rather than physical medication.
Well, that was great that you were able to, number one, diagnose what the patient had, and then number two, educate them, which, as you said, gave them great relief that they knew what was going on. And then number
Mhm.
three, you're able to refer them. So, perfect use of the local healthcare system. What was the most surprising thing and the most challenging thing that you saw or that you experienced?
In terms of surprising, I think it was really surprising how willing people were to come to the clinic and how excited they were to have healthcare come to them. I think we take healthcare for granted in the United States and in towns with a lot of healthcare access. Knowing that you can go to the doctor if you need it, if you have insurance, is it's a blessing, and that's not something that everybody has. So seeing people excited to come to the clinic when we did home visits and let them know that we were going to be there the next day for free visits. I think that was something that was really surprising because I hadn't really seen people excited about going to the doctor before. And then in terms of something that was really challenging, it was really, really challenging knowing that we could diagnose somebody, but not knowing if they were going to get the help that they needed because I didn't know if they were going to be able to go into town and see a physician to get medication for their chronic conditions. I didn't know if they were going to actually listen to what we were saying and sort of take our advice to heart. And so providing them with the information was really nice, but not knowing and kind of leaving them without all the resources that they need was definitely really challenging.
You pick a theme or a topic that's you're probably going to see moving forward in your medical school process, where very similar to what you experienced in Guatemala, you may have a patient population here that you'll be treating in the next few years that you'll highly recommend that they change their diet or get this medication or whatever. But due to either financial issues, access to healthcare issues, transportation, et cetera, they may not have the ability to follow up.
Right.
So it is frustrating, yes, and it's great that you're able to see that in this limited experience, know that it will be coming, and the best thing you did was obviously was educate them and try to help them as best possible. But once you learn the system, you can work the system to better help your patients. And hopefully the system, being that your local doctors there in Guatemala recommended them, hopefully the system is such that someone will give them transportation. Hopefully they will get there. So I'd always try to be as optimistic as possible, like thinking that they were able to follow up.
Absolutely.
Was there anyone of the patients that you did see that stood out or made a lasting impression on you?
Yeah, there was one that really sort of touched my heart in a way that I don't think I'll ever forget, but it was one of the last days of clinic. I think it was the second to last day. And on this day, we were fitting people with eyeglasses that we had brought from USC. So we had collected eyeglasses and then brought them with us to Guatemala. And one of the women had come in and she was having a lot of trouble seeing. That was kind of her only complaint, but she just wanted to see if we could help and didn't know if it was because of, you know, something else that was going on or she just had poor vision. And so we realized that her vitals were good. She didn't have any other conditions that we could identify. And so we started to fit her with glasses. And I was with another one of my peers who I've stayed in touch with through this whole process of applying to medical school. And she was one of the people that came on the medical mission trip with you to Belize. And so we were sitting with her and helping her try on glasses. We had a small eye chart across the wall. And basically we're just handing her glasses after glasses, trying to see if one would fit. And I will never forget the moment when she put on the glasses that corrected her vision the right way. and her eyes just sort of lit up. She looked at both of us and just smiled. And it's incredible to see something like that work out because we didn't know if there were going to be glasses that worked for her or if they were just going to be like close enough. And seeing something that really worked for her and knowing that she went home that night and could see her house in a way that she hadn't seen it and see the area around her in a way that she hadn't seen it before was just, it was amazing.
Well, isn't it amazing when it's the small things that make such a big difference? And you really warm my heart when you share that story because on an earlier podcast or two, I shared with the listening audience that it was one of my students at the University of South Carolina, golly, maybe 10, 15 years ago plus, that started the program. And I think it's a student organization called See the Difference at the University of South Carolina, where we collect glasses from the Lion's Eye Club and other entities, clean them, wrap them, and send them with service learning medical mission groups like yourself to be distributed as what you did. And the reason my student Taylor started that, she had the same experience as you, and she was discharging a patient. They couldn't read the discharge instructions. She didn't know if it was because they were illiterate or what the issue was, and came to find out that she had vision problems. So from then on, she started this student organization, and that's my challenge to all the people that are listening today. If you're at another university and you would like to do a legacy kind of thing, start an organization, name it something similar to See the Difference, and just go to your local Lions Eye Bank and start collecting glasses. And when you have student organizations on campus that are going abroad, let them take them with them. I mean, we don't have optometrists or ophthalmologists or anything with us on the trips. Eye charts are helpful. But if you can do simply as what you did, put them on a table, let them try them on until it works. It is a fantastic feeling when you see them light up like, wow, the gift of vision that you're able to present to them. That's huge. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Now, with all that said, do you really feel, because it sounds like there's a little frustration with, did I really make a difference because I didn't have the medicine. Do you really feel that your time there, you did make a difference in Guatemala?
I do. I think that having a group of students come to a different country and work with patients of a different population than we would experience in Columbia, South Carolina, or wherever we go for medical school was really beneficial for us as learners. But then also, even though we couldn't always give medication for a specific issue, it was more the idea that somebody was coming to listen and we were able to educate or provide behavioral changes that could help alleviate some of the symptoms and then provide them with answers or resources that they might not have had access to before. I think if you think about the way that it was a challenge for us to get to that rural town, I mean, we flew 2 different flights, took a bus from Guatemala City to Panajachel, and then had to take a bus up into the mountain. That's pretty inaccessible. And so think about the way that they experience healthcare and how inaccessible healthcare might be to them. So knowing that somebody, even if it was someone from a different country, was coming all that way just to listen to what they had going on and provide them with just feeling of compassion and understanding and then providing them with some resources. I think that I would like to think that that is valuable to those patients.
Well, again, thanks for sharing that, Rachel. I just actually reviewed this morning a student's personal statement for medical school, and the theme in her personal statement was presence. That she didn't feel that she could treat the patient adequately because of her student status, but the fact that she was there with the patient, was able to talk to the patient, be there for them, share some things. That was huge. And you really hit the nail on the head. Being there for them. I'm sure the people there are just blown away that you went so far out of your way. You gave up spring break with friends, basically, who were probably on beaches and partying, to go to an underserved country, to extend yourself, to go through a lot of travel and hardship to render care as best possible. And you made an indelible impression on those people in doing so. How has this experience really affected your future career goals in healthcare?
So I think that one of the things that I took away from this, and we've touched on this a little bit, is how inaccessible healthcare is to some people and how, like you just mentioned, how being there for a patient population can really just make the difference. And so I think as I go into my journey as a medical student and then as a physician, keeping in mind my experiences with people that don't have as much access to healthcare, who are in rural settings or uninsured populations, I think is something that will always stick with me and stick out. And so it has definitely influenced the part of medicine that I'm really interested in, knowing that I am interested in helping patients who are not seen as much in the healthcare system. So like my research focus on African American women in birthing settings, and they're not as respected and seen by physicians. And so keeping that in mind as I'm sort of transitioning in my life, I think will be really important to know which sort of patient populations I want to work with.
You've got a lot of international experience. What do you feel is the most sustainable, impactful way to contribute to global health? Do you feel students should go on trips like what you've done, or at the bare minimum, should they look for a course in their university? How can students learn more about global health?
I think so for me, I think the international trips are wonderful and it shaped my experience, but I think that shaped my experience so much because I'm really interested in global travel and I like hands-on learning. But I think the best thing for students to do is look inward and find what matters to them and then use their values to shape their experience. So for me, going and physically doing something in a community that's underserved really matters to me. And that has been really beneficial. But that might not be something that somebody's interested in, but they might be really interested in looking at policy and the research that is behind global health. And then, so if they're passionate about that, looking into that could be their way of making a difference. So I
What?
think
Go
yeah,
go ahead. No, go ahead.
just analyzing, your interests and doing what matters to you, having that passion is what's really going to propel you forward in that field.
What about those that are on the fence about actually going on a trip? I mean, they've had friends that have gone on a trip. They're in a student organization. They've seen a cohort go. They've seen their pictures or videos. How would you, for those that are kind of almost wanting to go, what advice would you give them to recommend that they do take advantage of the opportunity?
Yeah, it's definitely like a daunting feeling going to a new country, especially if you don't have experience traveling globally. So I think the biggest piece of advice that I would give is you don't really know how wonderful it's going to be until you just do it. So taking that first step and signing up for that trip is really it can get you really excited about it. So it can be daunting, looking at the itinerary or hearing stories about the trip, but until you actually go, you won't really know if you like it or not. But it is such a valuable thing to figure out that you like. So I would say for anybody that's on the fence about, maybe taking a trip, even internationally or domestically, just to try it out. I think that it's really valuable just to put your foot in the water and see what it's like before you rule it out completely.
That's such a common theme when I ask that question of everyone that's gone on these trips, step out of your comfort zone, try it, you'll like it because you don't know what's on the other side unless you go there. So many people are so hesitant to do that, but I always say that passion trumps everything. When they hear that passion in your voice and recommending it, and hear it consistently from a lot of people, they hopefully they'll think, well, maybe I should try this. And of course, when you do it, it's kind of like regrets. Why didn't I do this earlier? So, tell us about an upcoming trip that you've got.
Yeah,
Uh,
so yeah, sort of on the theme of sort of stepping out of my comfort zone and
uh-huh.
just taking the first step and doing something. I have about almost 2 months until I start medical school, and I decided to mark something off my bucket list that I've been wanting to do for a long time. So I'm going in the Camino de Santiago. It's a trek across northern Spain, and it'll take me about 30 to 35 days to do. So I'll be every day waking up and walking and just taking in the scenery around me, experiencing a simple way of life, and just basically walking across Spain.
Now you're doing this with a group or on your own?
So I'm actually going by myself. I have a lot of friends that are very international travel focused, but a lot of them are actually starting jobs. So because we graduated college, it's time to start working and getting experience in the workforce. So a lot of my friends are starting to work. So I decided that it was time for me to solo travel and do this one by myself.
Now you said 30 to 35 days. What's the actual distance on that, Rachel?
It's about 500 miles.
Wow.
So
Holy cow,
yeah.
that's fantastic. And obviously you've done your research. I mean, there's places to stay along the way and places to eat. How would you summarize that whole experience? I mean, looking into it, how would you how would you share with people why you're doing it and what that experience is going to be like for you?
So I hope to, kind of come out of the other side with this being the reality, but I hope that it's just going to be a way for me to take a break from the life that I've led for the past 4 years. I've been really involved with college and research and doing things academically, and I am going to, for the next 4 years, be doing med school and, be very academic focus. So I think it's going to be a really good way to step away from that for about a month and just sort of experience nature. I've grown up hiking, backpacking, and so I'm coming back to some of my roots that I haven't been able to do for the past 4 years of college. And it's honestly just going to be a step away from the lifestyle that I've become accustomed to. So I'll be eating really simple meals, sleeping in very simple accommodations. And I've seen people talk about the Camino and talk about that your only responsibility is to get up every day and
Mm.
put on your backpack and just walk. And I think that's going to be very refreshing because for the past 4 years, I've had multiple different responsibilities, juggling different involvements, and for once before medical school starts, I'm just going to be walking, and that's my only responsibility.
What a great way to treat yourself after the 4 years of intense schooling and training and education. I wish more people could hear that story. I always share be selfish in a good way and treat yourself more often because selfish has kind of got a negative connotation, and we hesitate to treat ourselves, and we should do that more often. So this is going to be fantastic. And it's the Camino de Santiago, is that correct?
Yes.
So hopefully people can look that up. And then your med school, what are the plans for med school? Where will you be going and how long is that going to be?
So I'll be starting at the University of Toledo. It's in Toledo, Ohio, right on Lake Erie, and it's about 3 hours from where I'm originally from. It'll be the 4 year program for the MD degree. And then I've been looking into doing an MPH along the way. TBD on that, not
Mhm.
completely certain. It's something that I want to do, but I'm unsure if I want to do it during medical school or wait until residency to pursue.
I've seen most recently a lot of students getting an MPH, Masters in Public Health, or even a business degree in addition to their MD, and that's really smart moving forward. And some actually recently I've seen some that have been MDs for years and coming back and getting a business degree or an MPH. So wherever you get it along the lines, it's just again, as I mentioned earlier, going to make you that more well-rounded to care for your
Absolutely.
patients. Well, Rachel, thank you so much for sharing everything with us. I could go on forever speaking to you about all of your travels and your plans. Any last words of wisdom you want to share with our listening audience before we sign off?
I've talked about this a lot with members of my pre-medical fraternity. So if you're somebody in Phi E, you've probably heard me say this before, but I think one of the biggest things that you can do during college, and we've mentioned this, is just to step out of your comfort zone. So spending that week in Guatemala was definitely not something that I was completely comfortable with, but it became something that loved. And I spent a semester in Barcelona, and that wasn't the most comfortable thing to decide to do either. And then spending another 4 years away from home for medical school it was a hard decision. Like it took a lot of planning and deciding to do, but even though they're difficult, every single hard decision that I've made, it becomes a little bit easier. So making this decision to go on the Camino, it was pretty simple. I decided that I wanted to do it, and I know myself and I know that I'm good with uncomfortable situations. So I knew that I would be able to adapt and handle it. So I think my biggest piece of advice to anybody that's listening to this, I'm on the other side of college, but maybe you're just starting, is to just experience some discomfort in your life and interact with people of different backgrounds and and have different life experiences. And I think you'll walk away from college with a much better understanding of the world and sort of what you're interested in. But
Well, it's so refreshing to hear. I know both of us sing the same song as far as stepping out of comfort zones. And I really like that concept because, I always share that when I've stepped out of my comfort zones, another door of opportunity is open for me. And sometimes I go through that. Well, most times I'll go through the door of opportunity. If I like what's on the other side, I'll keep going. If I don't like the other side, I won't keep going any further. At least I've tried it. I put my toe in the water, so to speak. And that's what life is. When I started nursing, 50 years ago, I've been a nurse 50 years. When I started nursing 50 years ago, it was people in their 70s and 80s that were dying off. But here we are now, people in their 30s, 40s, and 50s dying from a lot of medical problems that they shouldn't because of lifestyle issues and diet, and lack of exercise, et cetera, et cetera. So, we are spoiled, as you mentioned earlier. We take a lot of things for granted. And that day tomorrow isn't for granted. We need to live life to the fullest and do as much as we can, and push ourselves out of our comfort zone. Like you say, even though it was daunting to go to Spain for a semester, you made some great friends. You traveled around Europe. I mean, a whole lot of things happened that you never even imagined would happen. So that's great. I really appreciate you sharing that with those listening to step outside their comfort zone. Well, again, thank you so much for sharing with us where you've been and where you're at now and where you're going. Excited to follow you on the Community de Santiago, and excited to follow you as you progress through med school. Wish you the best.
thank you so much. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Bye-bye. I want to sincerely thank our guest Rachel for her willingness to join us on the International Service Learning Experiential Education podcast. But most importantly, I want to thank Rachel for the passion that she has shared with us today. I'm certain that Rachel will continue to be an advocate for those in international settings that need a helping hand, and undoubtedly will utilize her Spanish-speaking skills in her local clinical settings to help those with limited English proficiency.